In this video, I look at 6 appeal decisions for 6 very similar circumstances. The first 5 appeals are consistent in the logic applied by the inspectors, and the appeals are all dismissed. The 6th inspector applies a different reasoning and allows the appeal. I don't agree with the 6th decision. I'd be interested to see what you think. For the first case, the appellant's property is on the left with the works completed. The neighbouring property on the right is how it probably would have looked at the time of the application for the Lawful Development Certificate, the LDC. The property has a main hipped roof, a small hipped roof that sits on the side extension, and a small pitched roof over the front bay windows. The principal elevation is obviously the front elevation. Switching to 3D, there are 2 roof slopes within the principal elevation that front the main highway. This is the slope of interest. This is the stepped hipped roof, and this is the plane of the rearmost roof slope forming the principal elevation. As you see, the roof enlargement will be in front of the plane of the rearmost roof slope. The appeal was dismissed. This is very much the same as the previous case. The front is the principal elevation. The hip to gable conversion will be in front of the secondary hip roof, and the outcome was the same. The appeal was rejected. In this case, the appellant referred to a previous similar case approved by the same council. The council response was that the roof was different and so wasn't comparable, or, if we're wrong about that, we made a mistake when we approved it. The inspector backed up the council's get out by saying that a decision of the council does not provide judicial authority on the interpretation of the GPDO, the General Permitted Development Order. In other cases, it's not unusual to read variants of the following in the inspector's report. The council has provided the elevations and floor plans but has not supplied full details of each of the cited appeal examples. Here's another one. None of the appellant's examples present the same design or configuration of property such that direct comparisons are possible. So it's not surprising to find out that previous decisions rarely have an impact on the inspector's findings on the current case. In this case, the hip to cable conversion was in front of the roof slope, and as we might expect, the appeal was dismissed. The appellant asked how far back a wall or a roof slope has to be to avoid being part of a principal elevation. The inspector replied that neither the GPDO or the technical guidance have such a limit, so it could be way back. And another case where the appellant claimed that the return wall was too narrow to be considered part of the principal elevation. The inspector said neither the GPDO or the technical guidance stated a minimum dimension for the limitation to have effect, and the appeal was dismissed. Similarly, this wall was claimed to be too narrow. The result was the same, with a dismissal of the appeal. However, the next case was decided very differently. As before, the appellant claimed for a hip to gable enlargement, and the council rejected the application, quoting limitation B1C. The development is not permitted if any part of the dwelling house would, as a result of the works, extend beyond the plane of any existing roof slope which forms the principal elevation of the dwelling house and fronts a highway. Council stated that the principal elevation was formed in part by the small hip roof, which would be covered by the proposed gable wall. Let's check this with a 3D model. This is the front elevation. This is a projection of the house from the front, and we can easily identify the elements forming part of the front elevation. This is one of two roof slopes that form the principal elevation of the dwelling house and fronts a highway. This is the plane of that roof slope, and this is the proposed hip-to-gable conversion. It's clear that the development does extend beyond the plane of the roof slope, forming the principal elevation. Let's see what the appeal inspector said. I do not consider the small forward-facing part of the wall below the side hip to be part of the principal elevation of the dwelling. It's a side wall to the side-facing projection. The technical guidance envisages the principal elevation can be comprised of several forward-facing walls, such as in the case of bay windows or an L-shaped frontage. So there is no hard and fast rule as to what comprises a principal elevation. Had the guidance intended that all and every forward-facing wall was part of the principal elevation, it would have simply said so. The fact that it gives examples of multiple forward-facing walls that are part of the principal elevation suggests there are other examples of walls that would be forward-facing but not part of the principal elevation. That's what the inspector said. My reaction to this is, firstly, there is no need for the inspector to suggest a reason for the use of examples in the technical guidance, as it already states the reason for the inclusion of the examples and for their limited number. Here's what it says in the technical guidance. Diagrams have been included for illustrative purposes only, given the very substantial variations in the design of individual houses. This guide cannot cover all possible situations that may arise. I believe the inspector is reading something into the existence of examples that just isn't there. Secondly, and this is my personal opinion, I think there is some ambiguity in the words used by the inspector. The inspector says the wall in question is not part of the principal elevation because it is a side wall to the side projection. I find it unclear whether the inspector is using the word projection in a physical sense, a visual sense, or both. For clarity, let's replace this phrase with it is a side wall to the side extension. It has the same meaning. And then we can see that it's reasonable to argue that the wall in question can be a side wall to the side extension, and it can form part of the principal elevation. These respective physical and visual characteristics are not mutually exclusive, as alluded to by the inspector's odd phrasing, which may or may not have been deliberate. Thirdly, the inspector concluded the very narrow wall is not part of the principal elevation of the dwelling, but is a side wall to the side-facing projection, in which case the rear dormer does not project forward of a roof slope which forms the principal elevation of the dwelling, and so the proposal is permitted development. This argument is not convincing to me, as the sentence following "in which case" is a non sequitur. Proving the side wall is part of the side extension does not prove or disprove the legislative test that the dormer does not extend beyond the plane of the roof slope forming the principal elevation. The inspector allowed the appeal. I believe the inspector should have upheld the council's decision and dismissed the appeal. What's your opinion? If you're thinking of pressing the like or subscribe button, thank you. Next week, I find there's one small council in England that has more appeals for gable end conversions than Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, Newcastle all combined. So where is this place, and more interestingly, why? Thanks for watching. See you next week.